D1 is all about your design and thinking about the advantages and the disadvantages and being able to justify why you've chosen your final look or your design. And to achieve that, we'll look at certain decisions that you've made and think about how you can frame your argument. The overview from the spec is that D1 is to justify your design choices, identifying the advantages and disadvantages of each. And as we know, that's not quite all the detail. When we dive in a bit more and look at the assessment guidance, this is what the moderator will be looking at to mark your work. Learners should justify their design choices, outline the advantages and disadvantages of each, and the evidence can be in the form of report, presentation, or an extension to P3. I recommend you just write this on a Word document as an extension to P3. It's by far the easiest way to approach this. But if you want to do it as a presentation, then that is your choice. Let's think for a moment about product design, and from an overview, from a meta position, think about what a product should be like, what a product should feel like. A product should be easy to use. It should also be enjoyable to use, thinking about the spinning wheels that you might have when you're choosing a date using an iPhone, for example. The features should be discoverable without too many instructions on the screen. And the options should be understandable. It shouldn't be difficult to use. So that's what you're going to need to build into the app that you go ahead and design. In terms of the discoverability and understanding, you need to ask yourself the question, how is your user, and in this case these are Justin students, how are they going to work out what they can do with your app while limiting the amount of text or explanations or help that you need to put on the screen? And how do they know what all the settings mean? We're going to delve into this a bit more, but it's worth bearing in mind that you are regular users of apps and there are already some well-defined icons and some well-defined ways of working that exist currently on many iPhone apps, and you can simply use those to your advantage, and you can leverage those against what you want to achieve with your app. I'm going to be talking today about affordances and signifiers, and I want to introduce you to a man who is one of the shining lights in design theory, and his name is Don Norman, and he wrote a book called The Design of Everyday Things, and if you ever do a design course you will end up reading his book. It'll be probably the first item on the reading list. And let's look at two areas that he's defined. First and foremost, you have affordances. Affordances, they determine what actions are possible. So for example, what can be done on a phone. The idea that you can click and hold, you can double click, you can drag, you've got a vertical scroll bar, you've got a horizontal scroll bar, and so on. All of the different actions that you're able to do. The signifiers, those are the elements on screen that tell you what the action is that's going to take place. Is it going to open further settings? Is it going to be the button to press to export things? Is it going to be the button to go in and to change a certain detail? So all of these things you're going to need to communicate to your user, the client, via your screen. So it's worth thinking about these things while you're also thinking about how you can justify why you've made one choice over another. So it's worth thinking about what the choices are in the first place. So delving in a bit more into affordances, in front of you you can see a screenshot from, this is from my iPhone, and it's the Outlook app, and we're looking at one page on my diary, and this is Wednesday the 4th, and you can see it's got my timetable running from 8:30 through till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you've got Thursday the 5th beginning at the bottom there. So first of all, without having necessarily used this app before, I'm sure you've got a fairly good idea of where you would click and what gestures are possible on this screen. So let's run through them first of all and look at the affordances. These are the possibilities that exist on this screen. So first of all, there's the vertical scroll bar. It's interesting that in earlier apps going back a decade, there would actually be a vertical scroll bar on the screen because people were unused to them. Whereas now it doesn't need to be there anymore because most people expect you to be able to scroll vertically on a screen. So obviously the vertical scroll bar allows you to change the date to go from Wednesday the 4th until Thursday the 5th of December, for example. The second item that you've got on here, and there are plenty of them, are buttons. And these buttons aren't round or square, which used to be the way. They were raised when you go back again 5-10 years, whereas now they are just icons. So they're signifiers as well as being affordances. And you know that you're more likely to press on these or to press and hold on these to then go into additional menus, sub-menus and contextual menus and so on. So that's the second thing that you have there, are the buttons, even though they don't really look like buttons a great deal. We can then move on to the horizontal scroll bar, which runs across the top of the screen from left to right. So that allows us to go from the 8th of December onto the 9th and 10th by dragging and pulling from right to left. Beyond that, we also have these panels that exist. And you can see the panels just there, that's number 4. And if you click and hold on one of those panels, it then takes you to another contextual menu where you can start to add in more details about the appointment or the timings, or whether you want to set alarms and all that sort of stuff. So there's an awful lot on this screen, and again notice that we're talking about affordances, and yet actually that panel, it's not signified particularly clearly. We just know that it's there. So you can assume a certain knowledge of affordances already because your users are going to be probably expert users of an app on a mobile phone. However, what about the people who are in their 70s and 80s who are learning to drive for the first time? There will probably be fewer of them than there will 17 and 18-year-olds, but equally, the app needs to make sense to them. So what are you going to do in your design to make sure that your app appeals to both extremes of the age group that will be using it? Things to consider, and don't forget you'll be talking about advantages and disadvantages of your design, and you can't please everybody with one design, but you should aim to please most people, but not at the expense of hitting the sweet spot and making an app that's actually easy and enjoyable to use. You can see here that when we talk about affordances, sometimes you have the idea of, we've got the icons there, but also greying things out, things that aren't available. If they're grey, you know that you can't click on them. So now that we've covered the affordances and we've looked at signifiers, think about the different gestures that are available to you on a mobile phone. And these are common across Android and iOS. And to be honest, these days, that's now most of the phone market. Tap, double tap, drag, swipe, and so on. And you do not need to, nor necessarily would desire to incorporate all of these into your app, but they are available to you just the same.